Hello, everyone. Hello, and welcome to B&E Presents the Trend. This is episode 24, titled Yoga Nidra CEOs are tapping into this popular stress management technique. I am Alviana Brewster. I am the founder, owner, creator of Black Nurse Entrepreneurs. We are the premier networking organization for any Black nurse out there who is interested in launching, building, and growing your entrepreneurial endeavors worldwide. So, in this episode, I brought along a special guest named Dr.Latora Grant Scott. Let me tell you a little bit about this sister, right? Dr.Latora is the owner of Eclipse Health Consultants, LLC, and its affiliate, the Nurse Doc is Zen, merging the art and science of nursing with yogic practices, which promote holistic wellness. She is passionate about empowering others to reach their optimal level of physical health and emotional well-being. Dr. Latora is a proud alumni of Grambling State University, where she earned her BSN in 1994 and then went on to earn a BS in sociology in 1995 and an MPA in 1997 with specialization in health administration. Then in 2012, Dr. Latora successfully defended her dissertation and obtained her PhD in public health, y'all, with with a specialization in community education and health promotion from Walden University. Dr. Latora is a registered nurse with 26 years of clinical experience and is a heart failure nurse, has a heart failure nurse certification. Additionally, she has earned a 200-hour certificate and now is a registered yoga teacher. Dr. Latora has several specialized yoga certificates in the areas of YogaFit for warriors, trauma sensitive, YogaFit restoring balance, training the parasympathetic nervous system, senior YogaFit. As a holistic wellness practitioner, Dr. Latora provides CBD and ECS system education, therapeutic journaling, guided meditation sessions, and private restorative yoga for individuals and small groups. Without further ado, I'm going to present to you tonight my good friend, the wonderful yoga queen. I call her Dr. Latora Grant Scott. So hang on 2 seconds. Let me go grab her for it. Well, hello, sister. How are you today? So first, before we get started, we have something that we wanted to show everybody today because we have decided to dress alike and we didn't even know it. So everybody, y'all got to see We Are the Trend shirt, right? So We Are the Trend is obviously my catchphrase for our organization and our group. And you can get our shirt in our store. So thank you so much for representing us.
Always.
Good to see you. How are you doing today?
I'm doing well. Good to see you as well.
Thank you. So let me hold on. Let me brand us real quickly. We have to represent. There we are.
There we go.
We have to represent. Yes. So let's get started. So I hear that you've been a nurse for 26 years. So take us through that nursing journey first before we get totally into this.
Absolutely. So it's 26 years, but in May it will be 27. So I'm going on my 27th year.
Okay.
So I tell everybody they recruited me right out of preschool. What can I say? It's just one of those things.
Right.
So my nursing journey started. I had my BSN from Grambling State University, as you said, in 1994. So that was my base nursing. While I was in nursing school, I worked as a nurse tech. So I worked as a nurse technician. So honing those skills as a nurse. And then after I got out, I went back to work at the same hospital where I was a nurse tech. And so my transition from nurse tech to nurse supervisor was kind of quick. It was like, when you know the floor, you know everything. Oh, wow. And so I was working on a med-surg floor. So I worked for about 2 years before I started being like a shift supervisor and that type of thing. So I worked on a med-surg floor, but it was a med-surg floor where we saw dialysis patients. So peritoneal dialysis, that type of floor. It was in the height of, I graduated in 1994. At that time, we had a lot of HIV/AIDS patients on the floor. So it was that part of it. So I've lived through that and Ebola. So all type of thing.
Right. We've lived through it all, right?
Lived through it all. So that was my nursing journey. And so while I was working, I decided if I'm going to be a manager, I probably need some business, information. And so I decided to get my master's in public administration because I was administrator. By the time I went back to get my master's in public administration, health, which is the specialization was health service administration, I was actually doing infection control nursing. So I was an infection control nurse, and I was actually infection control nurse in a long-term acute care facility within the hospital where I was working. And so I was doing that, and I working, going to school. I've always done that, working and going to school, working and going to school. So after I got my master's, and everybody was like, why didn't you get it in nursing? Because I wanted it in health service administration, because I was doing administration. I thought that that's what I was going to do. And I did not continue to do that. I started, I took a postgraduate internship at an insurance company in Kansas City, Missouri. And so that story is very interesting. So people are like, how did you get there? So once I got my master's in health service administration, I wanted some experience in insurance. And so I applied for this graduate internship. And I love to tell this story because this is how God works. So they flew me up there for this internship. I go in and meet with the CEO of the company to do the interview because he's the one interviewing. And when I sit down, the first thing he says to me was, he's like, I'm just going to let you know up front, I'm only interviewing you because my wife happened to see your resume when we were on a plane, and she saw that you were a nurse, and my wife was a nurse. Mm-hmm. And he said, other than that, I never would have called you in for this interview. He was like, this is a business internship. You know, you have an impressive background as a nurse, but, you know, you didn't really go to a really big business school. You know, I got from an HBCU. He didn't say that, but that was the, you know, I could tell that he was like, so he said, I'm doing it so that my wife can't say that I didn't interview you. That was the start of the interview.
Wow.
And I said, well, you know, thank you for flying me in. I appreciate the opportunity. I thank you for speaking with me, and tell your wife, I said, thank you for recognizing a fellow nurse. This is a Caucasian man, right? So tell your wife, thank you for recognizing a fellow nurse. And he said, yes, she used to be a nurse. And I said, no, she's still a nurse. I said, because if you're a nurse once, you're always a nurse. And so as we're talking through the interview, he's already told me he's not going to hire me, right? He basically just brought me in to talk to her, so he could tell her that he did. Middle of the interview, he goes, you know, I like you. He said, you're pretty smart. And I'm thinking, I don't know if that's a compliment, but okay, thank you. He said, you know what we're going to do? He said, we have a special project that we need somebody to handle. And he said, I'm not going to hire you for what you came in here for. He said, but I'm going to create this position for you. He said, and you're going to be over this project if you decide to come work with us. And you'll just be over the project, and you're going to go, and we're going to put you in government affairs. You're going to work with the director, and this is going to be your project. And so you're going to be an intern. I think my title was administrative intern. He said, you're going to report to me and to the director. And you're not going to have to go through the program. And I was like, okay, I thought you weren't going to hire me about 2 seconds ago. And he said, well, you know, he said, think about it. He said, I'll work out the details. He said, I got to talk to the director of government affairs, you know, tell her what I'm thinking, because we have never done this before. He said, but I think you can handle it, and I'll send you something. So he sends me my first contract. They're going to move me up there. They're going to get the apartment for me. They rented everything. They're just going to move my whole life if I decide to come. It's like, okay, I can try it. We can, you know, why not? I go to do this. And so I end up working in government affairs for this insurance company. And my job, the job that they needed someone to respond to a RFP, so a request for proposal from the government. So this was during the time, because, you know, I'm young, but I'm not. I'm 50. This was during the Clinton era, doing CHIPS, right? So this was the first CHIPS. So we had to respond to an RFP for that. And I had to respond to it for Kansas and Missouri, because anybody that knows that Kansas City sits on the line, right? So the building, if you're on one side of the building, you're in Kansas City, Missouri. If you're on the other side, you're in Kansas City, Kansas, literally. So I had to look at this document. And this is, I tell everybody, this was pre-Joshua, so I still had a really good memory. And if I read something, I could actually remember it before I had pregnancy brain. I could literally like remember what page it was on and how many paragraphs down. That's how my brain worked at that time. Didn't quite work like that anymore. And so my job was to read this request for proposal, look at their policies and procedures. How can we answer this so that we could get this grant? Because they wanted the CHIPS grant. Had never done this before ever, had been a bedside nurse all my life. This was my first time outside of the hospital, and this is what they gave me. This was my internship, right? So I wrote the request for proposal for Kansas City and Missouri, got it together, worked with the director of government affairs, and then when we get ready to present it, she was like, okay, be ready on Monday because we're going to the Capitol for you to defend this. It was basically like doing a dissertation. I was like, I'm not understanding. She was like, you wrote it. It's your document. You're going. So I had to go and sit in front of the government for Missouri and have them ask me questions. And they had the CEO of the company, the vice president of government affairs, and this little HBCU nurse, right, that he didn't want to hire. And so we're sitting there and they're asking questions. And like I said, at the time, how my brain works, they're like, well, you said you responded to this for this particular the item number and why. And the CEO looked at me and I was like, page 65, 3 paragraphs down. That's where it is. And he flipped. So that was my job, was to answer these questions. So successfully defended this request for proposal and they got the contract for Missouri and Kansas. So that was my job for that. First time outside from the bedside. Went to Kansas City, fell in love, didn't stay at the job, got married and moved to Atlanta, Georgia. So this, like I said, this was pre-Joshua. Moved to Atlanta with his father and was working at Emory University in the health department for the university, for the school. So did that for a while. We stayed in Atlanta. Then we moved to Dallas. And when we moved to Dallas, I interviewed at Medical City, Dallas for a job as a transplant coordinator. Again, go into the interview. I have med-surg experience. I don't really have any transplant experience, right? I go in for the interview. The lady that interviewed me is like pregnant, like about to pop, pregnant. I had just had Joshua. He was literally 2 months old. And during our interview, she keeps going, ugh. And then she started back talking. And then we're just talking. And then she go, ugh. And she started back talking. And I was like, excuse me, are you okay? She's like, I think I'm having contractions, but I said, no. We're going to stop this right now because I don't do babies at all. And we're going to stop this interview and you're going to go. Oh, no. I was like, no, we're going to stop this interview and you're going to go take care of that because I'm not delivering babies for nobody. I just had one. Joshua was literally 2 months old. It was her first baby. She did not want to leave. It was the weirdest interview ever. Come to find out, she had her baby. When I left that interview, she had her baby like that night.
Wow.
So she ended up hiring me with no transplant experience or whatever because of our interview. So that's how I got into transplant nursing. So she hired me. She was like, same type of situation. She's like, well, you're not really a transplant coordinator because you've never done transplant before. But what we're going to do, we're going to hire you and we're going to let you run the clinic. She said, because med-surg, you're a nurse, it, so you can run the transplant clinic. She's like, so you don't have to be on call. You don't have to do all of that. You can do this. And so I did that for 2 years and then eventually transitioned into being a full transplant coordinator where I was actually calling people in and coordinating the transplants and stuff like that. So that's how I got into that. Went from there to going to work on the other side of the cardiovascular, where I was working on the chronic disease management side. So the patients that were either too well or too sick, they were never going to get a transplant. And so you're managing the heart failure that. And so at a whole nother hospital, but I'm in that department managing heart failure, pulmonary hypertension, interstitial lung disease. And so then I found out that was my jam. That was pulmonary hypertension, heart failure. That was my jam. I loved it. And so I ended up working in that clinic, helping them develop the pulmonary hypertension program for the healthcare system, and was just rocking along. Loved that. Became a supervisor, trained other nurses, was the resource nurse for the healthcare system, would go to other hospitals, train nurses for heart failure management and pulmonary hypertension. During that time, I became a nurse speaker for 2 pulmonary hypertension medication companies. And so that's kind of how I stepped my toe into industry, where I became a paid nurse speaker for those 2 companies. And how I actually work now as a medical science liaison. So I'm totally in the biopharm industry. So I totally went over to the dark side about 6 years ago. And how I actually got into that was at work doing my thing. And one of I was a PI, a sub PI, because for one of the trials for a early access program for one of the ILD trials. And the doctors made me a sub PI. Again, this is kind of how my life works. I'm sitting in a meeting. They're coming, the company came to tell us about, what the requirements were. We need somebody here every day that can screen these patients, that can take the vital signs, that can, do medication reconciliation and be able to fill this out. And they need to be in the clinic every day. And so the doctors are like, they have hospital and they have call and have different. And so I'm sitting in the meeting, I'm just taking notes, right? Because I just need to let the nurses know what's coming down the pipe. Medical director turns around, looks at me, he goes, "Don't you have your PhD?" I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "She's the sub PI. She'll be here every day." And I was then asked, he was like, "She's the sub PI. She'll be here every day." And they were like, "Yeah, she has a PhD, so she could do that." And I was like, "Okay." And so I became the sub PI on these two ILD research trials, and working with the biopharmaceutical companies. The day that we got our last patient enrolled, both drugs got commercially approved for the FDA. And so what that means is everybody that I had already enrolled in this early access program. So early access meaning they were getting the drug, so it was nobody on placebo. Everybody was on drug, but they were on study drug. Once it became commercially available, you have to transition all those people off study drug onto commercial drug. I had just got the last person enrolled. I'll never forget it. October 15th, 2015. So I had to go through and get all these people transitioned over to commercial drug. So because that happened, they sent someone from the company, they call them reimbursement managers. They sent someone to work with me to help me get these patients transitioned over. Again, this is how God works in my life. I'm doing my job. I don't even remember what happened. I honestly don't remember what happened. This is the story that the lady told me. She said that we were getting something done. Something happened in the clinic. Everybody was panicking. They came to ask me a question, and we were in the middle of doing something else. And she said, I'd never seen that before. She said, you just did never get frazzled. You just was like, okay, what's happening? What's going on? She said, your tone never changed. She said, you calmed everybody down without saying anything. She said, you just kept doing what you were doing. Like, okay, this is what we're going to do. This is what we're going to do. And she's like, you just totally de-escalated that situation. And she said, you never even looked up, I don't think. And I don't even remember this, so probably didn't. And so about a month later, I'm driving home from clinic. I get a phone call in the car from this lady. And she says, I'll see who it is on my phone. I'll pull over to the side of the road because I'm like, I'm going to have to go back to the hospital. That's what I'm thinking, because I was on my way home. I was like, something happened. I got to turn around and go back. So I pulled over to the side of the road, and I was like, hey, Sandy, what's up? And she said, do you have a resume or a CV? And I was like, of course I do. I keep a resume or a CV. I was like, I'm thinking that she wants me to be a speaker. because that's kind of what I'm doing now, being speakers for the company. And she said, well, can you send me your resume or CV tonight? I was like, okay, no problem. I said, what's up? I said, they already asked me to be a speaker. I already did that. I said, did they lose it? She's like, no, this is not what that's about. She said, they need a medical science liaison. Now, I had already been trying to be a medical science liaison since I got my PhD for 2 years. I had been interviewing, and everybody would say, you don't have any experience, so we can't hire you. You don't have any MSL experience. We can't hire you. Now, how you get experience without being hired, I don't know, but we can't hire you. So I have been going through that process of trying to get an MSL job and being told no. And she was like, send me your resume. I was like, okay, I'll send it to you, but it hadn't changed. I still don't have any MSL experience. She hand walked my resume to the hiring manager and was like, you need to hire this girl. I don't care if she's not had any MSL experience. She's a PhD RN. She's been an RN 20 something years. She works with these patients. She's the only person on your team that's ever touched these patients. You need to hire her. The other lady that did my resume, she was a nurse too. She worked in reimbursement. So I get a phone call. Again, this is how God works with me. I get a phone call on my day off. I answer the phone, and the person on the other end said, hello, Dr. Scott. Hello, may I speak with Dr. Scott? I immediately thought it was somebody in my family playing with me because nobody calls me that except my mother. So I answered the phone and they said, hello, may I speak with Dr. Scott? And I was like, who is this? Literally, just like that. I was like, who is this? I thought it was one of my cousins. Who is this? And he said, he told me who it was. He said, I'm calling from, he told me the company. And I went, I am so sorry. I said, let me explain. I said, no one calls me Dr. Scott ever. I was like, not even at work. I said, no one calls me Dr. Scott but my mother. And so I thought you were one of my cousins. So he just started laughing. I was like, I apologize. I said, so let's start over. And okay, so he called me and he was telling me why he called me. And he said, I'm gonna be perfectly honest with you. He said, if your resume had come through the system, he said, we probably never would have flagged it. He said, you don't have any MSL experience. He was like, you don't have any industry experience except for being a speaker. He said, and I had to dig for that. And so he said, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to redo your resume so that pops up. He said, because I never would have known. He said, but Sandy told me I need to talk to you. And he said, and this is why. And he told me this stuff. And I didn't remember that story at all that she told him. And then he said, so this is what's going to happen. The guy that called me, the hiring manager, happened to be a Black male, which is rare. Manager, associate director. He had graduated from an HBCU also. And he was like, look, I'm going to tell you how you're going to get this job. And he was like, this is what you do. I mean, literally, like, he was like, when you do your presentation, he said, don't do your presentation on a drug. Do your presentation on something that you are the expert on and they don't have a clue. He's like, when you come in, do this. He basically told me step by step, this is what you need to do. Got called. They flew me to California for the interview. This was during the time. And you remember when it flooded in Houston? Mm-hmm. When it had rained so much, it had flooded. So it flooded. This was during that time in 2015. So it had flooded. It was raining. Literally, I got on the plane. And as we're taking off to go to California, it started raining. So it wasn't raining before we took off. We're taking off to go to California, it started raining. And then when I got to California, I found out it had flooded. So we got out. Did my interview. We're flying back in. Could not land in Dallas because the airport was flooded. We're circling around the airport. I'm supposed to be at a training to be a speaker for this same company because they wanted me to be a nurse speaker. I'm supposed to be at a training to speak for this company the following day. So I was going to fly in that night and then go to Austin. So if you can't land in Dallas, right? They were like, we can't land in Dallas. We got to take you to Oklahoma. I can't go to Oklahoma. I'm supposed to be in Austin, right? We go to Oklahoma, sit on the mat for an hour. We try to fly back. They circle Dallas and they were like, we still cannot land. So our plane is being diverted. And so I'm thinking to myself, we're going to Houston, because that's where you go, right? When the plane is being diverted. Where did I just tell you I needed to be the next day? Austin. Plane gets diverted to Austin, which is where I was supposed to be.
Nice.
I was sitting on the plane going, did he just say we're going to Austin? I asked the lady sitting next to me. She said, yeah, why would we go to Austin? I was like, okay, God, thank you. I went to sleep. I was like, we're good. We're good. So get to Austin for the training. So I'm training to be a nurse speaker for this same company. And I get a phone call when I get to my room, and the guy says, this is the same as the hiring manager. He called and he said, look, the medical directors love your presentation. We want to offer you the job, but we can't because you've never applied for it. So they had flown me to California. They had done this. I didn't know I was supposed to go in the system and apply. I had never applied for the job. He said, HR was looking for you. They can't find you. You've never applied for the job. So they offered me the job before I even applied for it.
That's how God
works. So that's how God works. So that's how I got into being an MSL, which is what I'm currently doing. And what an MSL is, for people that don't know, is it stands for Medical Science Liaison. And how I always explain it is sort of like a nurse educator. That's the best analogy I can have. But you work with physicians and advanced practice physicians on their research. You find out what research they're interested in doing, or if they're interested in doing research that your company is doing. And if it's their personal research, they're usually wanting to use your product. They're wanting to use your product or your drug. And so they pitch their idea to you, or they pitch it to me, and then I bring it back to the medical team and say, Hospital X is interested in doing this, and they want drug or they want funding, and I pitch it, and then they say yes or no, and I go back to the doctor. That's one thing that I do. The other thing that I do is, if we have a new product, like the company I'm working with now has a new product that's coming out, I go and I tell them what the research is behind it. This is how we developed this trial. This is the patients that we looked at it in. This is what we think it can do for you. And then, so it's like a nurse educator, but you work with researchers and advanced practice clinicians. So that's what I do in the daytime when I'm not doing yoga. That's what I do.
All right, perfect. So I really want to know about this yoga. So you have to go ahead and break this yoga thing down to us, because you've gone through a whole lot. And it's like, how does this nurse that has this wide variety of experience get to yoga?
So yoga was to save my sanity, is how I started yoga, to be perfectly honest. I was going through a divorce. And when I say going through, like, I had not even filed yet. So the divorce happens way before the filing happens, unfortunately. So I was going through that, and I was still working full time, have a son. And it was just stressed. I was just stressed all the time. And I needed a way I was already doing meditation, which center and prayer is my favorite form of meditation, which is a Christian-based meditative practice. I was doing center and prayer, and doing my meditative time, I was asking, like, what can I do? Because I physically need to do something else. And so yoga started for me by looking on YouTube and doing practices on YouTube, because I was too embarrassed to go to a class. I'm not that girl. I was like, I'm not going to no yoga class. No. So I wouldn't go. And so I started by looking at YouTube videos and doing it in my house. Loved it. And then eventually went out to my first yoga class, and then I was hooked. I happened to get a Black yoga instructor who embraced me, and she was like, I want to see you every week, at least once a week. You need to come back. And because I was like in the back, she was like, come up front. No, why are you hiding? She was not letting me hide. She was like, why are you hiding back there? Come up front. and we love you. And I was like, oh, just stay away from me, you crazy lady. So, and she followed me on Facebook. I was like, this girl is crazy. And she would send me these little messages. You're doing so good. And she was like, what are you doing? And are you practicing every day when I don't see you? And I'm like, leave me alone, crazy lady. So, but that's how I got started. And I loved it. And then I fooled around with one of my cousins and went to a hot yoga class. And that was it for me. That is my jam. I went to a hot yoga class, and at first I was thinking, who in their right mind would do hot yoga, especially in Texas in the summertime? That is insanity. It's already 1,000 degrees outside, and now I'm going to go into a room where you got heat on and you're trying to make me do all these poses. The most therapeutic experience ever, because number one, your body is more limber and more supple because it's warm. You are concentrating because it's so hot. You don't have time to worry about who's doing what on their mat because you're focused on yourself. It was the best experience ever. So that's how I got into yoga, and how I got into it was for my own personal sanity. And then what I've learned in yoga is that what we think of as yoga is not all that yoga is. So when I say yoga, people are usually, the first thing they'll say to me is, I'm not flexible enough to do yoga. That's the very first thing that everybody says to me. That's the point. That's why you need yoga. Okay. Number one, that's why you need yoga. But that's the one aspect of yoga. So yoga is not just the postures and the asanas. And yoga is definitely not what we see on social media. That's usually contortionism or something else. So that is not, you don't have to be able to do all that. If you can breathe, you can do yoga. Because one of the limbs of yoga is called pranayama, and it's actually literally the breath. There's a whole practice of yoga where all you do is sit and pay attention to your breathing. That's it. So if you can breathe, you can do yoga. So that's usually my response to people. When you did my introduction, you talked about yogic practice. And I was like, the reason it's yogic practice is because it's not just the yoga, the asanas, it's meditation, it's the breathing, it's the intentional breathing. It's how you interact with people in the world. There's something called yama, it's a niyama. So how do you treat yourself and how do you treat others? All of that is yoga. And so when I kind of embraced that into my practice, into my life, and that's how I kind of became the nurse doc is in, because of course, I'm always a nurse, always, and saw how some of the physical benefits of yoga, the mental and emotional benefits of yoga, just for me personally. High family history of hypertension. Even though I eat pretty clean, I exercise all the time. Genetics are genetics. They are what they are. So I tell people all the time, people are like, why do you do all that? I was like, I manage my blood pressure and manage my stress so that it doesn't kill me. That's what I use. That's what I use it for. I take my medicine though. I'm not saying that I take my medicine, but I also manage my stress and manage my blood pressure by meditation and also the movement of the yogic practice. So, and I integrated that with the nursing, and how I got into the nurse doc is in, I Googled yoga and nursing. I just put it in a Google search, yoga and nursing. And the first thing that popped up was yoga nurse. Like that's the actual thing. And I was like, what? So there's actually a course called Yoga Nurse, and they teach yoga from a medical, clinical perspective.
Interesting.
And so they teach you how to work with patients and clients that have specific needs. So if I'm working with a patient that has anxiety or has some type of trauma, the practice that we have together is specific for that particular disease process. and you learn how to work with patients for that. And so that's how I became a yoga teacher, because I went through that training for yoga nursing. And then Yoga Nidra, which is what you got me on here to talk about.
Yes.
Yoga Nidra is a niche of yoga that is called yogic. Some people refer to it as yogic sleep. But it's Yoga Nidra. And so there have been studies, and they've actually done scientific studies, and I can put the resources in there for people that are geeks like me that want all that. I can drop that in the group. There are studies that show that 30 minutes, a 30-minute practice of Yoga Nidra, or 20 to 30-minute practice of Yoga Nidra, is equivalent to 2 to 3 hours of sleep.
Nice.
And so physiologically, your body feels like it has gotten 2 to 3 hours of sleep from 20 to 30 minutes of Yoga Nidra. And so this is a big thing with like CEOs and people that own their own businesses because of the time factor. And so I wanted to bring it to nurse entrepreneurs because the time factor, and how do we do self-care? Because a lot of times we're so busy taking care of everybody else and everything else that we don't have a good self-care practice or a consistent one. So we'll think, well, I'll do self-cares on Sundays. Sundays is self-care day, meaning Sunday I'm gonna relax, or Sunday I'm gonna take a bubble bath. And I have personal Sabbaths. I do that personal Sabbaths. That's my personal Sabbath day when I'm doing like a spa day, something special. But you should do self-care every single day.
Right.
Because you're with yourself every single day. And I tell people all the time, I don't know what the rules are as far as religion, but my background is Christianity. So I'm going to talk from that aspect of it. I look at it as tithing. You have 24 hours in a day. And if you tell me out of 24 hours in a day, you can't give yourself 20 minutes, that's a problem. If we consider ourselves a temple and we are temples of God, and you can't spend 20 minutes getting the temple ready. I was like, if you were inviting the president of the United States over to your house, you would at least clean up the living room, right? I mean, right? You make sure the living room was clean and the bathroom that he's gonna go into was clean. So what do you mean you don't have 20 minutes? And so a lot of the clients that I work with, I have a real estate nurse that I work with. She's not a nurse, she's a real estate investor in Texas. And all she does when I meet with her is Yoga Nidra. She's like, I ain't interested in none of that. I ain't trying to stand on my head. I don't want to do I'm not doing that prayer thing that you do, my favorite thing. He said, I don't want none of that. All I want is for you to walk me through a Yoga Nidra practice. That's it. And that's what we do every session. All of her sessions are Yoga Nidra. And so people will say, well, how do you do Yoga Nidra?
Yeah, that was going to be my question.
If you can sit still, so it can be done a couple of ways. If you're comfortable sitting up and sitting still, you can do it that way. I prefer for you to be reclined because I want you to be totally relaxed, like you were actually going to take a nap. Mm-hmm. And before COVID, when I could actually meet with her, I would have her laid out and I would put a bolster under her back and I prop her feet up and I put weighted blankets on her and put a scented thing over her eyes and totally had the room quiet and have her like totally supported. And we would start with, because she's a boss. She used to tell her, doing everything, tell everybody it's like, you have to trust me and trust the mat. First thing I need you to do is relax your eyes and unwrinkle your forehead. What are you thinking about? Just let it go. Trust the mat, let it go. And so get them in a relaxed state. And then it's similar to a guided meditation practice, mm-hmm. but it's not meditation. It's actually a physiological thing that's going on with the person. I will find out ahead of time if they're having any physical issues going on, like, are you having migraines this week? Are you on your menstrual cycle? What is going on with you? And there are actually different keywords and different things that you can do to trigger to help them get into that state of homeostasis. So you're resetting the PNS system and getting them to relax, and they're listening to my voice. Sometimes we'll have music. It depends on if it's too much of a distraction for this particular person, because her brain is going, that's too much. It's too much stimuli. So no music. It's just me. Or I might have like some ocean sounds. It just depends. It depends on how wired she is that day when she comes in. And I walk her through the practice. Sometimes she falls asleep. Sometimes she doesn't. If she falls asleep, I'll tell her, then that's what you needed. That's what your body needed. But if she does it at the end of 20 minutes, she never thinks it's been 20 minutes. She's like, what do you mean we're done? I'm like, it's been 25. Actually, I gave you, we're done. And she was like, I don't think I can move. I was like, that's the point. That's why I'm getting you up now, because I know you got to drive back to Arlington. So I sit her up, have her sit there for a moment, regain herself, because you're so totally relaxed. I don't let her leave immediately because I don't think it's safe. I'm like, I need you to get back into your faculties. And so I have that client, and then I have another one that's a transplant, was a transplant recipient, and we'll do it. She does actual Ashana practice and that with me. But I have a lot of like people that are on their own companies and different things like that, and that's what they want. They don't want the physical Ashana practice. They want the yoga nidra, and that's because it is a way to reset your system. It's a way to reset your PNS system, to reset your biological clock to where you go through the rest of your day. It decreases your stress. And then also at night, what I will have people tell me is that they seem to go to sleep faster if they were having problems, because they know how to get themselves into that relaxation state.
Nice.
So that's what yoga nidra is.
When you're doing these, are you doing them individually, or do you have group sessions too?
I can do either or. I've only done maybe 2 groups, but you can definitely do it in a group. But I usually have individual clients, and that's just because I usually, even with my Ashana practice, I usually have individual clients, and that just has been it's not because that's what I do. It's just that has been how people have come to me. And a lot of times people, especially if they're actually doing the Ashana practice, they'll tell me they don't want to be in a group because they're like I was. They don't want anybody looking at them. Mm-hmm. And so they want one-on-one. Or I've done groups where it's family members. It's like 3 people in a family and that type of thing. But I can do it either way. And I've done groups where I sponsored the group, and I like to introduce it to people. Like, this is what this is. You can come and we can do this practice. So.
Why do you think it's important for people of color?
I think it's important for people of color because self-care in general is important for people of color, because we have so many stressors. Mm-hmm. Not that people that are not of color don't have stress, but we have different types of stressors. And what I make it equivalent to is, I was reading a book and it talked about, I'm going to use African American women because that's what I am. And it talked about generational trauma. Just like people talk about generational curses. And it was talking about generational trauma. And from slavery to now. And in the book, she gave the example of Black women are responsible for taking care of the world, and always have been. She's like, so we take care of their business, their children, their wives. She was talking about Caucasian men and them, because she was like, from slavery time, you took care of everything, and you couldn't even take care. And then you couldn't take care of your own children because they would take them away from you. But you were responsible for taking care of the world. So yourself as a person, you never thought about yourself because you were so busy taking care of everything. And she said, translate that into modern America is we may be the CEO or we may be the manager. We're running someone else's company. And usually the owner is a white male, and we're taking care of that. then we're doing all that stuff that we do at work. And then we come home. If we have a spouse, they want attention. We have children, you got to take care of them. And then if you stop and sit down, I just remember my son coming to me one day. I was in the bed because I was just tired. I was just sitting in the bed, and he came to me. He's like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, I said, "Mommy needs a nap." He was like, "Mommies don't nap." This is when he was small. He's like, "Mommies don't nap and they don't get sick." I said, "Well, today, mommy needs a nap." Okay. And because he was like, mommies don't take naps and mommies don't get sick because they expect you to always, because we always do. And then in this book, it was Dr. Brenham, that's her name. She, Brooke Brenham, she said that the quote, she always talks about the quote from Malcolm X that African-American females are the most disrespected people in America. And she said, "But why is that?" And she said, "Because we allow it." She said, "Because we don't expect no different." She said, "You expect to be disrespected." She said, "Because if you can't take care of yourself and you can't treat yourself well, the reflection is you don't expect anybody else to treat you well either." So you have to learn to change the narrative and actually take care of yourself and treat yourself well. And then you won't accept anything else from anybody else. Because if you treat yourself a certain way, you won't allow anybody else to treat you a certain way. And when I'm working with men, especially younger men, and this is going to date me a little bit, how I usually get them to understand it is, you got a new pair of kicks, right? You got a new pair of shoes. I don't know about other men, but black men, you better not step on that shoe, right? Okay, we're gonna have us a problem.
Right.
That's a shoe. That's a shoe. It's a thing. So why would you let somebody step on you if you're not? It's the equivalent. You treat yourself at least as well as you treat your shoes.
I like it.
It's what I mean. It is what it is.
'Cause I know, man, they are something else about those Air Force Ones and Jordans and stuff.
Shoes and cars. Shoes and cars.
This is true. That makes a total sense though. So I'm going to be visually seeing that all the time, but it's the truth. It's the truth, and we do a lot for just the country as a whole, and we do have to start advocating for ourselves a little bit better because we do deserve it. We do deserve it, and so you're completely right.
And then if you add nurse on top of that,
yeah,
a black female nurse.
it's a lot.
I mean, the fact that we are sane, I mean, literally, I tell people that all the time, they think I'm drunk. I say, the fact that you were mentally able to get up today and function, you are a badass.
Yeah.
Because it's plenty of people that would have broken. The fact that we were able to get up and function on a day-to-day basis and at the level, the people in this group, I see some of the stuff they're doing at the level that you're doing it on, and to be able to do it every single day. And I guarantee you, most of these people still got families. And I tell people, just because you don't have any biological children, you probably got some kids that you're influential over, because that's what we do. Or you got some people, you got your circle. The fact that you can do that and nurse, especially our frontline nurses, I love y'all. You can do that every single day and still be sane and still look as good as we look and still do all the stuff that we do.
Bad to the bone.
Always.
So, what this makes me think of, initially my thoughts was, well, who could benefit from doing yoga nidra? And obviously everybody can benefit. But I think this is something that really and truthfully us as Black nurses in this organization need to focus on. At this point, like all of us need to be taking your classes because especially during this season where, the stress level is astronomical. And I've seen a lot of nurses talking about just how they're just worn out, they're just tired. And we really need that reset, that mind, body, and spirit kind of reset. And so I can see the true benefits of being able to do a yoga nidra or any other of aspects of yoga to really help with the self-care aspect of it for sure.
That was one reason why I wanted to definitely bring it to on this platform, because when I was thinking, I was like, who could benefit the most from this? And I think about last year, 2020, being the year of the nurse. We didn't know what that meant, what it was going to really mean. Meaning, once again, we were holding up this country. That's basically what it was. Once again, I used to tell people all the time when I worked in the hospital, I was like, the doctor is in here seeing you maybe 2-3 minutes, maybe 5. The nurses are keeping you alive all night. Remember that when you're talking to them crazy, okay?
Right. That's true.
You need to respect that and respect the fact that they are professionals and are taking care of you. And I'm talking from the CNA on up. That's who's taking care of you. That's who's calling. That's who's watching you, monitoring you, letting the doctor know what's going on. That's who's keeping you alive. And so once again, we were holding up the country. And I guarantee you, I had a client. It's funny, but it's not funny. 2 days ago, she was like, I've been trying to get her to do actual yoga, the movement, because she's always talking about her back is hurting. And I was like, just one class with me. And she's like, I don't even have time to breathe. I said, don't you think that's a problem? If you don't have time to breathe, that's a problem, because you need that to be alive to do whatever it is you think that you need to do. So you need to stop and breathe with me for a minute, right? So that you can go do whatever else you think you want to do. I mean, and she was just, serious. I don't have time to breathe. Yeah, you kind of do. You do. And you're holding your breath right now is what I told her. So let it out. Exactly. Let them shoulders down and back. Relax that forehead and let it out.
Let it out. We need somebody to really advocate for us and tell us, it's okay to be at this point, but recognizing that you're tired, you're stressed out, and you're worn out, and you need that help is the most important part of it. Just like you said, hey, you can't breathe. We might need to have a conversation about that, and this is okay. Like there's no need for anybody. And one thing I can say about whenever I did the yoga with you on the cruise, and a lot of people are like, oh, wait, oh, hold on. Oh, I can't do this or whatever. And you're like, you know what? Mind your mat and do what you can do. You do what you can do. It is completely okay if you can't get into this position like I can, but I've been doing this for a while now. What we want you to do is start at ground zero and let's work our way up. And you keep at it, eventually you'll be maybe just as flexible as you are. I don't know. But
I'm truly not the most flexible person. That's just making me smile. The fact that you remembered that, because that's actually my favorite line is mind your mat.
Mind your mat. And I also remember getting to pretty close to the point of falling asleep. I was really close. I was like, I could just lay right here on my mat and just go right on out at this point.
See, that's Savasana. So that's Savasana. That's you do that at the end of every yoga practice at the end. So that was Savasana, which is a little different than Yoga Nidra, but everybody loves that. And I tell people all the time, if all you come to do in the class is to lay on your mat and wait for Savasana, you did yoga. It's fine. You listen to your own body and do what your body says to do. And the mind your mat thing is also to get people out of their head, because that was me. That's why I wouldn't go to a class. You think that people are in the class looking at you and that they're judging you. They're not. They're trying to keep from falling over. They're not paying any attention to you at all because they're minding their own mat. And you mind your own mat and you listen to your own body and It's called yoga practice. I tell people that all the time. It's called yoga practice. Just like it's called practicing medicine. It's called yoga practice, not yoga perfect. You just do it. You start where you are and you do what you can do. And some days, for me, certain poses that I've been able to get into for years, on that particular day, my body's like, I don't feel like doing that. And no. You acknowledge that and say, okay, well, maybe tomorrow, I'll be able to do this again. But today, we're not doing that. And it's for a reason. Your body, you have to listen to your body. Your body will tell you what it needs. Some days, all I need to do is sit in child's pose and just sit there until I fall asleep. And that's it. That's all we're doing today. That's it.
Tell us, I think about the typical benefits of yoga, flexibility, stability, strength, blood flow. Tell us, huh? Mobility, absolutely. Tell us one thing that yoga does that we may not think about.
I think something that we don't think about as far as the homeostasis aspect of yoga. So in my intro, I talked about the ECS system and CBD. And so CBD is like the buzz thing now, right? You actually have internal endocannabinoids in your body. And there's studies that have shown that other exercises are one thing, but yoga specifically actually activates anandamide. And anandamide is one of our internal cannabinoids. And so it helps the body go into homeostasis and it helps us to relax. Anandamide is called the bliss hormone. So for years before, I didn't even know about the endocannabinoid system for years. You think about that runner's high or that the giddiness that you get from exercising. And we were like, oh, those are endorphins. It's not. It's anandamide. And if you think about it as a nurse, it makes sense. Endorphins are like opioids. What do opioids do? They calm you down. So why would you be high off of endorphins? No, it's anandamide, which is the bliss hormone. That's that giddiness. And then you get that bliss and then when you relax and you calm down, then endorphins kick in. It was like, girl, sit down. But the anandamide is what have you high and happy and giddy. And yoga specifically, it actually initiates that. And I wrote an article that I shared on Michelle's platform called Yoga Lit, and how the yoga and CBD, what the connection is. And that's what it's talking about, how yoga is actually yoga and sleep actually ignites your ECS system because they're both considered cannabinoid practice. So if you do yoga Nidra, you got all those little neurons firing. And after yoga Nidra practice, yes, the person feels relaxed, but they feel so happy. They're like giddy, like all these little neurons in their brain are firing because you got all these little nanamides dancing around in there. And so you feel happy. So that's another benefit of yoga Nidra. It's a pick-me-up. It activates that bliss hormone.
Perfect. How about nurses? How can we specifically get involved into the yoga sector? Like if we're wanting to be instructors and teach it from that yoga nurse standpoint.
So yoga nurse is actually a brand, okay? It's a registered trademark brand, yoga nurse. It was the founder is a nurse who been practicing yoga. She's in her 60s now. She's been practicing yoga since the 70s. She is the sweetest, most badass. I don't even know how else to explain it. She is a true hippie. Because she is the sweetest, calmest, whatever, and then she's cursing, and then she's just the coolest lady ever. And so I practiced through there, and they actually have a yoga teacher training where some people have heard of yoga therapy, maybe where you actually use yoga as therapy. And yoga therapy was developed by physical therapists. And so it's taught from a physical therapist standpoint. Yoga nursing is literally taught from a clinical nursing standpoint. Whereas when I meet with clients, I ask them, are you, same thing, your SOAP thing, are you doing your nursing assessment? Are you having any problems? Are you feeling any pain? Or what medications are you on? Because that makes a difference. If they tell me they're on blood thinners and different things like that, I know that we don't need to be doing a lot of stuff where they're going to be bruised up when they leave, because then they're not going to come back, right? So it's taught from that aspect of it. So I would recommend that program, and people are interested in that, I can give them that information to anybody that's interested from that aspect. It was wonderful. The first thing that they teach you is called the Sacred Remedy. She developed this thing called the Sacred Remedy, and she developed it for nurses. And what it's doing, it teaches you to sit and breathe intentionally and calm yourself and think. And the whole practice is from a seated in a chair, and you're doing these significant movements. But the whole thing is you're breathing into the pose. Raising your hand, breathe into the pose. Bring your hands down, breathe into the pose. Turn, breathe into the pose. Making sure you're taking your breath. And so, yeah, I would definitely recommend that, especially for nurses. It's pretty cool, especially when you go into the anatomy of the yoga poses, which, I mean, I'm a geek like that. That was probably my favorite part of the whole training, was you look at like what muscles are you actually activating to get into this pose or for the full expression. And then knowing that my hips are my hips, and your hips are your hips. And so I probably may not ever be able to get my box that wide because my hips don't go like that. And that's okay.
Okay. It's okay.
That's
so
okay.
What's next for you?
What's next for me? I have an event coming up on the 27th of this month, which is a Saturday, and it's with Black Girl Health, which is another group that I'm part of. And I can get people the information if you go to blackgirlhealth.com. They do these different health and wellness events, and they're doing one for Houston. It's called the Houston event, but it's virtual and it's free. And it's virtual and it's online, so you can be anywhere, but it's called the Houston event because they host them. The host is in different parts of the country. And the theme for this particular event is mental well-being, and specifically mental well-being for African-American women. And so there's going to be different speakers during the day talking about different aspects of emotional well-being and mental well-being. And I'm doing a session on resetting your PNS system at the end and how you use yoga to do that. I won't do a yoga nidra session because people have to drive.
You're right.
But
I'm probably be out.
But I'm gonna do a restorative flow, which is something in yoga that restorative flow, you usually hold the poses 1 to 2 minutes, and it's a slower pace, and you're doing things that are targeted specifically to calm the CNS system. So I'm going to do a practice for that. That's coming up on the 27th.
Very, very nice. Very nice. Good. So, before we wrap up, I do want to give you the opportunity. I know that you have a book out there on the market. And so I got my copy of the book. And so I want you to talk to us about your book.
Okay. My book is called...
I got to get my copy too.
It's called Seasons of Holiness. And holiness is spelled with a W because it's whole well-being and not necessarily holy but it is a devotional. And it's a book that I wrote with 2 other dear friends of mine. And it's a functional working devotion. And so it gives you a scripture, but then it gives you a self-care practice to do that's related to that scripture. And so it is faith-based, and you read the scripture, and we kind of give you each author was responsible for different aspects of it. But what I told them, I can tell it was a great collaboration, because when I read the book, I can't tell what I wrote and what they wrote.
Oh, nice.
It just kind of flowed. So I can't, I have to actually go back and look as to what I was assigned to know if I wrote that. So it flows like one person wrote it. But it has different activities and like different self-care activities that you can do, and you can write in it, you can journal in it. And so it's a book it's an actionable book. So it's actually like a journal.
Very good. Perfect. One last thing. What is your final thought for the BNE community when it comes to just yoga, self-care, wellness? What would you say to our community?
My final thought is self-care is a daily practice. It's not something that you do on special occasions, and it's not something that you do once a week. One of the I was telling you about the yoga class that I finally went to, and the yoga instructor that just kind of was almost like just decided she had adopted me. Mm-hmm. I still remember one of the things she said in class. She said, you are the love of your life. Because no one will be with you as long as you are with you, ever. She said, you are the love of your life. And so you need to treat yourself like you are the love of your life. She said, if you're looking for the love of your life, go look in the mirror, because it's you. And so you treat yourself accordingly. And I just always remember that. And she would say that just about every class. She was like, you are the love of your life. And you treat yourself as such. And so that would be my final thought to people, is get into the mindset of you are the love of your life. And it's okay. And I think from a mother's perspective, I always had that mommy guilt. If I was doing something for me, I felt like I was being selfish, because you could be doing this and you need to be doing that. And then at the end of the day, if I'm sick or dead, then who's going to take care of them? Yeah. Actually, that's the biggest thing, or the greatest gift that I can give to him, is to have a healthy mother. Absolutely. Or for your spouse to have a healthy spouse, or your friends to have a healthy friend. That's the biggest gift that you can give to the world, is for you to be healthy.
I 100% agree. That's good stuff there. So I thank you. I really appreciate it. You know what's funny? Out of all of the interviews I've ever done, I feel all relaxed. I feel like
it's my voice. It's so monotone.
You have the yoga voice? Is that what it is?
I don't know about yoga voice, but I'm probably boring, and it just kind of lulls people to sleep.
No, I just even talking about it has just kind of set me into that atmosphere of just peace, and just like, okay, I can be relaxed with this. So I definitely appreciate your contribution, not only to our organization, but to us as Black men and women trying to improve our health. Again, mind, body, and soul is so incredibly important. And we have to get to a point where we're really advocating for ourselves. Not only individually, but collectively as a community is really important.
Absolutely.
So I see what you're doing, the work that you're doing, as being a key token to that as well. So I certainly appreciate everything as usual. And so
I appreciate you, and definitely appreciate you sharing your platform and all that you do for all of us. It's amazing to me, the things that you do, and you do it and you move in stealth mode most of the time. It's like it's like stealth, that Black Hawk stealth. You don't know it's there, but when that baby hit, it's on. So that's just kind of what you remind me of. And so I really appreciate you, and I appreciate the platform.
Absolutely. It's been my pleasure. So we'll wrap up. That's it for us today. Make sure that you follow us across all of our social media platforms. Sometimes we be in the club. And so tonight you can join us in just a few minutes. When we wrap up here, we'll go over to Clubhouse and and kind of have what I like to call the after party. But all of our information for our podcast and our social media platforms are in the biography section. I've also included Latora's information too. You'll see it scrolling there across the bottom of the screen, but also in the biography section or the description of the post. All of her information is there. And you'll see her, periodically. She's kind of quiet a little bit, but you'll see her on our social media page because she always posts these weird poses. And you'll be like, I don't know how in the world she got into that pose. But you know what? What I've learned from her, and she's one of the best people I believe to do yoga, is because she's not one of those people that is like judging you and being ugly to you about not being able to get into certain positions and things like that. She's always been so nice to be like, hey, just do what you can do, and don't mind my mat, mind your mat, and everything will be good. And so I really appreciate just your demeanor when it comes to us and dealing, because we can be something else. But anyhow, that's it. Just make sure you follow us, our app. Make sure you download the app. Make sure you visit our website. I have tons of resources. This community is just growing and growing and growing. So I always want to make sure that people are being fed appropriately. So like I said, that's us. That's it for us. And as I always say, that we don't follow trends, but we are the trends. So we have to represent our shirts today, right? Thank you so very much. And we will see you actually just here in a few minutes. So good night. Everybody stay safe. Mind your mat.
Mind your mat.
And take care of yourself. Bye.